U.S. Special Forces have launched a mission to train troops in Mozambique who are dealing with a violent insurgency in that country. The conflict has already killed more than 2,000 people. Debora Patta reports.
It's been swift and brutal. An insurgency in northern Mozambique's Cabo Delgado that's taken everyone by surprise. In the past year alone, militants that American officials say are linked to ISIS have captured huge swaths of territory and beheaded hundreds of civilians. As the conflict rapidly accelerated near some of the world's biggest gas reserves, villages were cleared out, at least 2,000 civilians killed, nearly 700,000 people displaced. Those who managed to escape are growing increasingly frantic. Food is running out, says a desperate Yusuf Salima.
I'm very angry. I have 3 days without eating nothing.
And still, they continue to flee the terror in droves, often in boats, setting up makeshift camps in the hope of evading militants with a taste for butchery. These traumatized children were forced to run for their lives. Their uncle, Saeed Ahmad, holds up his brother's ID card. He was beheaded along with 6 others. We have nothing left, he said. The men who attacked our village told us, we kill as we please. Alberto Carlos can only guess what happened to his 14-year-old granddaughter. I don't know if they took my granddaughter to marry her or kill her. Stories of sickening acts of violence against children abound. Some as young as 11 have been beheaded, according to human rights organizations, turning this once idyllic island paradise into a place of terror, hidden in a remote corner of the world so often forgotten and ignored.
We want to bring in Debora Patta to talk more about this story. Debora, these details are heartbreaking and stomach-churning. I want to start where you ended. Children as young as 11 being beheaded. What do we know about these horrific crimes?
Indeed, Anne-Marie, as if things couldn't get any worse for Mozambique. Now this report from Save the Children detailing horrific crimes against very, very young children. They managed to get into displaced camps where refugees have been streaming, people who've been forced out of the area by militants, and talk to them about their experiences. What they found was that these children, some as young as 11, have been beheaded. One mother said that she tried to run away with her children and that she was intercepted by these militants who grabbed one of them. She hid while she watched her 12-year-old son being murdered. Another woman said her son was just 11 years old when he was beheaded by this group. And it seems that it's mainly males who are being beheaded, young male children, whilst the young girls are apprehended, abducted, and taken into captivity and then forced to marry these jihadists. That's a euphemism basically for rape. They're forced to become sex slaves. And as the director of Save the Children said, that this is very traumatic and it sickens them to the core to learn about these kinds of things. Anne-Marie?
Yeah, it is sickening. What on earth is the country's government doing? How are they responding?
Well, frankly, Anne-Marie, the Mozambican government is battling. They are not winning this war against this insurgency. The northern part of Mozambique, Cabo Delgado, has been home to a festering insurgency actually for just over 3 years. But over the past year, it has escalated rapidly. And that rapid acceleration of the crisis has really taken everyone by surprise, everyone, from US officials to diplomats to Mozambican counterterrorism units as well. So they are deeply concerned about what is going on, but battling to suppress this insurgency. Think about this. In 2017, towards the end of 2017, there were a couple dozen fighters in that area. Now they number over 800, and experts say they have the capacity to launch attacks in neighboring Tanzania, that they perhaps are linked to criminal networks in those countries, looking at things like animal trafficking and the like. So certainly a very dangerous group that's grown. To give you a sense of how that conflict has escalated, if you look at some of the displaced camps that have arisen as people have fled from the area, in the past 3 months alone, some of those camps have actually doubled in size. The Mozambican troops are beset by divisions within their own ranks. That's made suppressing the insurgency difficult. Then about 2 years ago, a Kremlin-linked Russian group, the Wagner Group, came into the country. Over about 150 of these contractors came. But the Wagner Group also had to leave with their tails between their legs. They were beaten roundly in battle by this ISIS group. And in fact, about 7 of these contractors were killed. And so then the Mozambican government turned to South Africa, specifically to South African mercenaries. But just recently, Amnesty International brought out a report accusing those mercenaries of gross human rights violations and of blatantly killing civilians. And it seems to me that either way, those mercenaries had no real capacity to end the violence in Mozambique either, Anne-Marie.
So, Debora, you know, we talked about the fact that the U.S. is sending Special Forces troops to train in Mozambique. How does the U.S. regard this growing insurgency?
With deep concern, Anne-Marie, so much so that last week they actually labeled ISIS in Mozambique as a foreign terrorist group, which is a strong designation. It's known locally as Al-Sunnah wa Jama'ah, and they've put sanctions on its leader, Abu Yusir Hassan. So very strong condemnation there from the US. But as you said, they've also sent troops to train Mozambican forces, and some very basic training, but there is ongoing talks with the Mozambican government, specifically looking at the Minister of Interior to try and look at perhaps training to set up counter-terrorism units within the police force, and other civil military types of training and specialist training is being spoken about. We spoke to a senior US state official who told us that it would seem to me that they are very, very clearly linked to ISIS, and that they have garnered this information when they've looked at the battlefield tactics. Those have developed, their capabilities have grown over the past few years since they first started there 3 years ago. So that's something that they're looking at. And also what they're actually doing on the ground. It would seem to be, according to this US state official, that in fact their aim seems to be territorial expansion, areas that they regard as of value to them. But other than that, not a lot is actually known about this group. But one thing is at the center, the absolute butchery and brutality of this group. The same US state official said they are driving women, they're driving men, they're driving people out of the area, killing people with horrific violence. And the words that were used was violence that is grimly remarkable. Anne-Marie?
Debora, thank you so much for joining us. This is a story that more people need to know about. I really appreciate it.